Welcome back to Peony Painting Part 2. Now, this is Part 2 of a floral painting demonstration from life, and I'll be able to talk through this one. Last time I was doing this recording, I wasn't able to speak, and now I can. So I'd like to talk you through my thoughts rather than type them out. So you can see, at this point, I've established the major values. I've established the form and all of the smaller petals, and at this moment what I'm trying to do is get each of those petals to be more finessed in terms of volume. So I'm looking at exactly what makes this specific petal change. What are those value shifts? How is it turning? And how can I communicate that clearly to the viewer? A lot of it is copying what you see, and some of it is copying a little bit less of what you see and more what you think needs to happen. So it's a combination of what's in front of you and concept. At this point, it's also slower moving. In the beginning, when you're trying to figure out what colors will suit to lay down, right? So what kind of local colors will exist within the space? You're also thinking in terms of relativity, and the best thing you can do is get those colors all laid down to the best of your visual acuity, and then go in, reassess, and finesse. So it's not like I'm just painting one petal at a time, making that one petal perfect, and then moving on to the next. It's let's get our darks, let's get our lights, let's get that big form, model those values and colors as they're happening across that big form, and then start to work petal to petal. And it's really at this time too, in thinking about form, I'm thinking a little bit about texture. Texture is a lot to do with detail, so sometimes that involves ignoring a lot of the little things and just trying to get the major value structure within that one petal. Now, I know that when I'm painting on a particular petal, that value structure isn't going to go too extreme in any direction. I've already laid out my darks and my lights, so anything that I'm putting down really should sit within the value that is already there. In other words, when I'm working on, let's say, the third petal from the left or the second petal from the right, I know that that petal is in that halftone family. It is not facing the light like the other two on the left. So when I'm working on it, I'm thinking of that as a whole, and I'm making sure that my lights on that petal do not compete with the lights on the petals on the left. So in that sense, you may have heard the terms big form modeling before. That's really what I'm talking about. I'm trying to keep that big form modeling happening. If the lights were pushed too light on that middle or third to the right petal, then it would start to come forward and it would flatten out that flower. So I'm thinking about the order of values as they must be, and that is very helpful at this point. Right now, what I'm also doing is trying to push those darks a little bit while also pushing the chroma. And I'm trying to lean the hue still within that red family, but I'm trying to see how much I can push it. Is it going to be more pink? Is it going to be more purple? And this is based off of what I see. It's also based off of the limitations of my paints. So as a review, I'm using the majority of this flower is alizarin crimson, Michael Harding magenta, and titanium white. I don't believe I touched any cadmium red, but if I did, it would be in these moments here. And in order to turn the form, it's with the titanium white and sometimes a little bit of burnt umber if I need to lower the chroma, or sometimes a little bit of French ultramarine blue if I need to maintain a purpler, bluer shift in hue. Right here where I'm placing my brush, I'm thinking about the bed bug line. So where that shadow really takes over, I'm trying not to make it too dark because darkness can be very overwhelming for flowers and we really want them to sing in terms of their chroma. So my thoughts are, how can I push this bed bug line to exist in this space at just a dark enough value? And sometimes it means darkening the value, pushing it, like I just did there, seeing how that sits. And sometimes it's pulling back, like if I go too dark, then I might pull back a little bit. So at this point, I'm really sort of testing those boundaries. It's a very much push and pull sort of play. And in the end, you end up, going back and forth less and less until you land where you need to go. It's important to keep the chroma in your shadows and that the hue doesn't compete too much with the hue of your petals. So overall, this flower is very pink, which is why it would make sense to have shadows that are in that pink family as well. Now, there is a lot of talk about warm and cool. I would say in this case, the shadows are warmer and the lights are cooler. But really, I'm just trying to think about hue and value and chroma rather than warmth or coolness. It's a pretty slow process. There's a lot of looking that happens at this moment. So anytime you see me not painting, that is when I'm sitting back and inspecting, and I'm going back and forth slowly between my painting and the petals in front of me to really see what I can change or what's working. Now, before overdeveloping any aspect of the head of the flower, I do like to set in the greens because color is relative. When I'm working on something like a pink flower, I know that green is pretty much the complementary color. It's on the opposite side of the color wheel. So if I don't get it in quick enough, it's really going to hinder how I pull off the head of this flower, the petals of this flower. So I'm taking a lot of time choosing my mixtures here, really trying to make sure that I'm going dark enough, again, starting with my darks, but at the same time fixing my drawing and making sure that I have enough chroma. So again, just like those upper petals, we don't want the dark parts of our leaves to look too black. They need to have a sense of green in them. What I'll be looking at though is in the lights, do the greens tend to be more yellow leaning in hue? And do the shadows tend to be more blue in hue? Which is the conclusion I believe I came to. Now, in knowing this, I'm also looking at what I actually see. So I'm trying to take the paint that's on my brush and really work it in so that I'm not making anything up. And it's slow, and I'm glad I pre-mixed my palette. So at this point, I'm just trying to take the right size brush, dip it into the right color, and by gauging off of my darkest dark, I am then able to sort of stair step out of those and feel more comfortable leading up to what creates the form, which is the halftones, and then the light. It's really fun to do the stems. It's a little bit less thoughtful and easier. I would say it's definitely easier to do a stem than it is to try and create undulating form across a petal. This is more of a column. So I'm thinking about the shadow side, the light side, and then how to create the sense of form on a column by keeping the left side a little bit dark and just in from the left lighter. I'm also seeing what colors can be shared. So in the stem, are some of those colors similar to some of the colors in the leaves? Not getting over detailed with anything. Really just trying to place things in as I see them. And it might look a little bit like I'm blending. More so, I'd like to argue that I'm just knowing that every time I touch my brush to a different color, it's changing. So sometimes I want my brush to go a little darker, and I'll finesse in a little bit of a dark area. When I want it to go lighter, I'll touch a lighter area or back to my palette if I really want to change something. I believe so far, though, this entire green area has been done with this one brush. For those of you who are interested, this is a Creative Mark Ebony Splendor brush, and it's really a nice brush because the hairs are soft, they're synthetic, but they have enough pushback. They're not too springy, but they're not too soft either. A little bit of blending here, but a little bit more thinking about shape and form. You can see my lights are leaning a little bit more blue. So if we were to think in terms of color on this petal, I'm really copying more of what I see, whereas leaf. I know that in the stem, the lights lean a little bit more yellow. So at the end of the day, we don't make up any rules or anything to follow like a warm and cool structure. We mimic what we see. At this point, I'm really just trying to get the values right. It's an exploration, it's a test. If this, then that, sort of domino effect kind of thing. So I'm not worried about putting in any details, any vein structure. Really, it's just shape, contour, and form with color. Which is enough. That's enough to think about. Now this leaf is a more cupped form, so it's part of the peony anatomy that it used to be the outer shell, and it cups it in its spherical nature and then opens up. And early on when it opens up, it stays in that cup form before releasing itself. And so in this case, the light was really shining through it and making this brilliant yellow. So this high chroma yellow. So that's what I was going for there. That was definitely with a cadmium yellow. It's really fun to play with different greens. So when I mix greens, I'm making sure to lean some more blue, some more yellow. I'm also making sure to mix in a little bit of a red to my greens so they don't look too removed from the situation. So a little bit of burnt umber, a little bit of alizarin crimson can go a long way, just a touch. It makes it look more natural, and it also makes it look connected to the flower that it is attached to. Because this composition is not just this sole flower, and it incorporates the one to the left and the one to the right, again, it's just about laying down this foundation of a color, foundation of shapes, to get a better sense of what my drawing was getting at. So when you're doing your drawing with the raw umber, you know what you want to see from those sketchy lines. It's not overly descriptive. It's not like we're spending a day or two on making the perfect drawing and the perfect composition. So when it comes into this point where I'm looking at taking that very sketchy, ghosted idea of what the other two flowers are doing and what these leaves are doing, I'm really purposeful in my choices. And sometimes I will backtrack and say, oh, you know what, I laid down that leaf there and I don't like it and I'm going to remove it. And that's because the drawing wasn't perfected. The reason why the drawing wasn't perfected was because I really wanted to get into the painting of the flower. These flowers are so difficult because they open up in front of you. The flower will open up and change. So you don't have a lot of time to spend in your composition. You want to set it up and quickly get it down there. And that's exactly what I did. Luckily, this peony didn't open up too much in front of me while I was working. And I do know that the stem will stay pretty clear. It's not going to change that much. I'm also using north light, so I know the lighting situation won't change. And that's extremely helpful. And just to speak to that for a minute, north light is incredibly beautiful light to work under. It creates less harsh shadows. The light source is further away than, let's say, a light stand in artificial lighting. Even if you were using a light box or a shadow box or something to diffuse your light, you're still going to have more intense, less chromatic shadows if you're using artificial light than if you're using north light. So for me, in this case, I just set up sort of this impromptu setup in the garage, and it's like 1, 2, 3, here we go. There's not a lot of prep. It's very much about being quick in those preliminary decisions. And then now I'm going off of those preliminary decisions that I liked from the setup and from my drawing and establishing them in form and color and drawing and changing them as I go a little bit. And for me, when I'm working with flowers, I will change the leaves a little bit to suit the composition. Not so much the petals, but the leaves. And most painters will tell you that composition is one of the most important things that you can be focusing on. And just because I'm putting it off a little bit doesn't mean that it's not going to come to the forefront and be very, very important. So it's definitely something that I'm thinking about very much at this moment. Even so much as, like, if I put this chroma here, how is it going to affect the whole? Is it going to pull forward too much in front of the peony that's supposed to be behind? Or, should I soften the edges a little bit like I'm doing now? Sort of pushing down those edges with this Rosemary Eclipse brush. It's called an Eclipse Comber. It's a really nice brush. If you end up having a lot of paint somewhere and you need to keep adding paint to it to change it a little bit, it's a good brush to take and just sort of feather down, laying the paint down more flat so that you can get rid of the ridges and keep adding paint. I'm not using it to blend. I think it might look like that, but that's not the case. So I pushed those colors down, really trying to get rid of ridges, and now I'm making sure my darks are present enough and blue enough so that there is depth and enough for this weighted head to rest on this neck. And if If your neck and stem look too weak on your flower, it's not going to hold up. Overall, it's not a lot of time that I'm spending on this stem and the leaves around it. I'm really just trying to get the basics in there, understand what I'm seeing, lay it down, and then move on to the other flowers because time is precious with them more so than it is with these leaves. And it's much easier, as I was saying, to simplify leaves and kind of play with them after the fact to enhance a composition than it is to, let's say, play with petals. They're more complicated and harder to change. All right, let's cut through to sort of a few minutes later. So we're really just sort of jumping ahead here. And I'd like to speed up the process and move on to looking at some of the other buds and how those were put down in this context. So let's cut to that part. So back to a big brush, laying in those darks, maintaining that chroma, thinking about placement of petals, drawing, and form. Let's spend some time with this one a little bit. I didn't draw it out as much as the other, and so it's really slower. Trying to make sure those darks are within the crevices of the petals and to the bottom right side of this flower. In fact, what I'd like to do is now take the time to do a speedier look at this. So rather than look at it in real time, let's speed it up. And I know that based off of what you saw from the first demo of the flower head, that this will make a lot of sense. All right, so enjoy.